Hey everyone, this is part 2 of a multi-part video where Matt and I talk about our histories. The beginning is a little jarring because it is cut off from the middle of the last video, so if you haven't seen the last video, check it out and you'll have more context for this video. But just to briefly remind you, we're talking now about college. Last video was kind of middle school, high school. So yeah, here we go. Thank you so much for watching. We love you. My freshman year was...
Which is when we...
Oh, true.
You were one of the first people I met.
Yeah, we did meet in freshman
this is
year.
where our paths...
Yes.
So, I guess just for, if I can interrupt you
for,
for 1 second. While I'm, going from, confident Pythagorean mystic, post-depression, I'm entering my next, phase of depression in my life where, this Cartesian demon is after me, which... Again, watch our video about that if you want to know what that is and why it's so distressing, or at least why it was so distressing for me and Alice a little bit. But I think I really went through it. That combined with my leaving home for the first time. Unlike Alice, I had really loved high school. Through discovering physics and mathematics, it got me out of that depression I was in middle school. So in high school, I loved it, and I became really attached to it. And the friend group I made there. Who still watches our Jason comments a lot on our videos,
wonderful.
So it's a little bit of a full circle there in terms of that. But so thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone else as part of our community.
Thank you so much.
But I had become so attached to that, and by the time and my rationalistic Platonist Pythagorean Platonic philosophy that Descartes comes in, crashes that, and then concretely, in my social life and my practical, biological social existence, my the one thing that a one constant and the one time I really felt ordered and attached and meaningful in my life had also been shattered, because I was at Drew, but I wasn't in. I grew up in a small little town called Bayville. I wasn't in Bayville anymore, and I wasn't at Central Regional, my old high school. So I was totally fucked, and that this is when I met Alex.
Yeah.
So I was at definitely probably was either the lowest or the almost pretty much equally low point, where I was reverting to I was back in middle school in terms of depression and intellectual and academic confidence and kind of sense of self had really even though my sense of self was the most lost it had been at the point where we first met, because at least in middle school I was very antagonistic, but at least I had a self that I could hold on to. I was oh, okay, I'm this way and the world's painful and the world is bad. I just learned in my Freud seminar that I'm in now in grad school about the purified ego. I was that purified ego that had, there wasn't things wrong with me except for the fact that I was a human being, but that's only because humans are horrible and the world is bad, and there's nothing really bad in here. But then it really kind of shattered at Drew. So in that sense, it was worse. So just for chronological, adding some detail to my own, what I was saying before, into where Alice is. Sorry to interrupt you for this little tangent, but that's kind of where we were crossing paths at. So what you just heard about Alice, her going into college, and this is my state of mind going into college and where we met and first started. And I think we could get along in some of our well, we're at Drew, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
I think that was kind of both of our attitudes and why we kind of clicked early on.
I think it was also more framed around I don't think we were talking about it in that language at all.
No, but I think that's the vibes we picked up.
Oh, for sure.
They were kind of very rudimentary topics of I'm into this and this music and those games and this media and I play sports and I have a job when I'm not at Drew. I have a summer job.
That was something we bonded over. Yeah, because we both worked food service.
But I think there was this overlying vibe of we had kind of not a similar upbringing in terms of the exact details. I was not really going through any gender dysphoria, and my high school was very nice, but we were both going through this very, I think, transformative, and we were kind of acknowledging that on a very concrete level to start. But as we would become closer friends, we would kind of go through these radical transformations at Drew that really kind of rocked our worlds and
so true.
Redefined who we were and what we were doing in the world.
I feel it's also worth mentioning though that we weren't really close at all freshman year. We were in the same circles and we were friends certainly, but we weren't.
I definitely think we clicked well though when we
for
did
sure.
hang out. And there was that
definitely.
there was that little circle of like me and you
Yeah,
and
yeah. There was
a few
like
others.
philosophy people,
We were going to the
video game
philosophy club. We
people.
were both getting exposed to some of the first, the same philosophy with by some of the
Yes.
same professors, which is interesting now that we're like kind of just another thing I've been thinking about because this is also not only like where we were but like where we are now. Like we're kind of continuations, right, of like the people who taught us, like Dr. Lee. You didn't really have Dr. Cole, but I had Dr. Cole and Dr. Anderson.
For sure,
We
for
should we
sure.
should totally
Feel.
send them this video. We
Oh
should totally
yeah,
send them this
yeah. I think
video
that would
or
be
get them
great.
to watch it and
I hope they
subscribe. But
would.
yeah, and like if you're watching this, we're continuations of you, and we're putting
Yes.
philosophy in the world
Yes,
and the
certainly.
impact you had on us, and then helping us reshape, who we
Our
are,
identities and our like ways
which
of
is
being in the
totally
world.
fluid, by the way. That's another important lesson
Yes,
out of
fluidity of
this.
identity is like
And fluidity of everything, but
and everything
especially,
too. Yes.
especially identity in this case. So
Another thing to mention for me that I did not mention is that like going into college, the summer before going into college, I was also on like what felt kind of like an upward, because like high school had been horrible and high school is really rough. But at the end of my high school, I started dating this new person, and that like just like kind of really improved my quality of life and my overall like reality and sense of self. And um, so going into college and then that turning into like a long distance relationship, that added another level of like, similar to Matt, I was on like I had been like on this really long rough journey, and then I had like a slight like positive trend right before college, and then I got to college and like yeah in a lot
as
of
the Germans
ways.
say, kaput.
And it's funny, I think my freshman year was kind of a more traditional college experience. Like, I was meeting people, I was doing things. I was definitely into philosophy and into these things, but I wasn't really like deeply into anything. I was just kind of lost. I was very lost. I was at a time in my life where I felt really lost and really directionless, and I felt like everything I was learning was just about how horrible the world was. Like I would take really cool classes and I would get to learn really cool stuff about topics that I was interested in, but it would be like, I would like take an anthropology class and we'd talk about how like we would talk about rape culture at college, and it was like, oh great, more of like what I had to
Sounds
fucking
like my middle school experience. It's just like, here's an information that like exposes how horrible the world is, and now you have to like live with this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very like burdensome. I mean, at least for me,
Mhm.
middle school, it just sounds similar, but like at least for me, like learning that kind of things, even though it was a different phase of life, it was very burdensome. Like it's very like there's a kind of putting that on you, like you have to do something because you're a part of the world, right? And then that's a kind of a consequence of getting this like, you know, of course I'm gonna bring in Hegel, but like I think it fits here. Like Hegel like talks about as like consciousness becomes more aware of like the whole totality, spirit, it's fucking crazy. It's so negative and it's so like oftentimes like so much death is involved, and it's just it's painful, and it's what he calls the labor of consciousness. But like it's a result of like you growing, which is I think is important like lesson too, to kind of abstract away from this and like where we are now. Like I think we both really accept that like death and pain and hardship is part of growing. But
Yeah,
at
for
this
sure.
point in our lives, which for me was a lot in middle school, and again kind of true, and then you right where you're saying now, what you're in your story is like lots of pain without realizing like bearing that, but not realizing you have to bear it to grow and improve things. It's more just like
There was
very
no
hopelessness.
there was no sense of like, oh, something good is going to come of this. It was I also had no spirituality at this point. Like this was probably like the period of my life that I was least spiritual at, like because I was pretty Catholic when I was younger, because I was in Catholic school, and like you know when you're there, it's hard to not become like entranced in that. And when I was even younger, I was like just straight up like magical. Like I would read these books, and I would like read this like fantasy stuff, and I was like, well, like all of this is happening. Like I'm reading all these books, and like I just had an understanding of like the way story worked, and like how that like mirrored reality, or how reality mirrored story. And like I had a framework of like there is magic, like there is magic, and like I can't necessarily define it or describe it, but like it exists, and it's like a fundamental force in our world.
Shout out Schilling. We made a video about that.
Yes, the temporal god of love.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, college, freshman year, really low point for me. I remember like I started drinking a little. I never got really heavy into drinking at all, but like there were some nights that like 2 or 3 nights that I got like pretty drunk with some friends.
Is one of them the
And
Nicolas Cage movie night?
yeah, that's where I'm getting to. that's
Let's go. I had a feeling that-
oh god. So if anyone has ever, so like there were like 2
What's that movie
times
called?
leaving Las Vegas.
Las Vegas,
Yeah,
oh my God.
so there were like 2
Such a
times.
film, what a
It is a
film.
film. Yeah.
Favorite films of all time. Like it's like bad, but like I don't know, it has this like room feel to it where it's like so bad that it's good.
Mm.
Like I genuinely enjoyed watching it and like felt like I got something out of it.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
funny because it's such like a shit. Like on the surface, it seems like it's such a shit movie.
Yeah,
Maybe
I mean,
because of that
I
movie.
thought it was pretty
I'm not a
deep
big
and
movie
powerful,
person,
honestly.
so,
Like,
I felt
and it's
felt something. watching it.
yeah,
Like,
and I mean,
wow.
it's one
Like,
of
I learned something. Like,
it's
maybe
one of
I
his
shouldn't wallow in my sorrows and like.
it's one of his most like well-regarded performances too.
Yeah, he did a really good job. Like
Um,
the movie is kind of cheap feeling, but like his acting is phenomenal.
Mhm.
Nicolas Cage. is
Yeah, and so I had like 1 or 2 nights where I got really drunk, and just like typical, college, like we were playing Mario Kart. I don't know.
I was playing Lego Star Wars too on
That
this
was a
laptop that we're
different
recording
time.
on now.
Wow, that's
Whoa.
wow.
Another circuit.
I remember I actually remember distinctly that time we were playing Lego Star Wars, and I remember like feeling this feeling of like total and complete lostness, like
Oh no.
yeah, because I couldn't.
I think you like left early that night.
I did. I did because I couldn't figure out how to like play the game. I was like I have become so incapable of like moving through reality that I can't play fucking Lego Star Wars.
So true.
It's
Like,
oh, God, it was tragic. It
That
was.
is like an insult.
No,
It's
no.
like, wow, like,
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
heavy,
it was like, I was just so depressed that I couldn't even like find enough, like, and also, I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but like, I was eating horror, like my diet consisted of Monster Energy and Takis and not really much else, like, and so like,
Doritos
I was
carry on
complete,
Takis
yeah, that was like, that was more of an addiction than alcohol, certainly.
Probably worse because of that too.
Yeah, Takis got me high. I'll say, like,
Wow, really?
yeah. At that time, when I first started eating them, I remember I would be like, "Huh, this feels like a high." And I had never smoked weed at the time, like I never consumed any sort of drug really. But like, having smoked cannabis since then, like I can say, like there's a certain type of high you get from eating Takis. Like it's this really weird, like you just get like complete. I
I always
don't know.
hated Takis.
They're disgusting.
I tried 'em, like,
They're
once,
so
and I
gross.
People do this?
Accurate reaction.
When you would offer me them, I'd always like, wow.
I think I just ate them because I hated myself. I think I just ate them.
Sadistic.
Yeah, like masochistic kind of like. Anyway, so hopefully that gives you a general like frame, like idea of the kind of headspace I was in at the time, and so just horrible. And we were watching this movie, and it was called Leaving Las Vegas. And again, at this point, I had only been drunk 1 or 2 times, but it was pretty like impactful those times that I had been drunk. And then we watched this movie, which is about how Nicolas Cage like just like his life is destroyed because of alcoholism, and he gets fired from his job. And
But
so
it was more like determined that he after he got fired from his job, he was like, I am going to
that's
kill
what I was
myself.
getting to,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, it just seemed like you glazed over that at the beginning. So
No, yeah. So he.
Sorry. Anyway.
It's okay. The movie starts and he gets fired from his job for being an alcoholic, and you see this like kind of an ending of like whatever his life was before, which we don't really know. And then he's like, okay, I want to go and kill myself through being an alcoholic, basically. Like, I want to drink myself to death in Las Vegas. And so he goes to Las Vegas and he falls in love with this prostitute, and he just drinks himself to death. And that's the movie. He's just like a severe.
The prostitute is really interesting though, because like,
Oh, she's fascinating.
She finds salvation through him. She like sees there's like a Hegelian recognition, and she sees herself in that, and she's the one that like Aufhebung, she reaches a higher state of consciousness because she's like, whoa, I see myself in you. Let me like, and then she falls in love with him too, because it's really interesting. Like, I'm sure when I understand psychoanalysis better, I'll watch that I'll watch that film again. I'll be like, whoa, but at least I can notice that. So anyway, it's just really interesting how like he saved her, but like did not save himself, which was
Yeah.
like there's like tension in that. This is I
Mhm.
think why there's some level of good writing, because there's this like tension. It's like you think there's always a chance that he'll like save himself because she's like constantly convincing him,
Yeah.
and she's getting better. So you wonder if that's like foreshadowing Nicolas Cage
Mhm.
getting better.
And then he just dies.
I was gonna say I don't know if we should spoil it or not.
Oh,
He does not get better.
sorry.
He does not get better. He fucking like does it. He does.
Yeah.
He does what he set out to do.
Mhm.
He was determined, and this kind of like Camus. We just made a video. There's lots of shout outs to other videos we've had. We just made a Camus video. It's doing decently well and healthy on our channel, which thank you for that, by the way, too. It's all about living with scorn and with like individualistic determination against the world, and that's exactly what Nicolas Cage did. That's how he died. He with scorn. He was like, "Fuck the world, and I'm going to drink myself to death," and he did. He died.
Yeah.
I think he was having sex while he died.
Yeah, he
with the
was. He was having
prostitute.
sex with the prostitute, and he was saying like, "My angel," and like, and
It was
so
really fucking sad. Actually.
it was.
I'm like feeling things now, remembering
Yeah.
that. Wow.
And so
I'm gonna say it. This is a good film. This
Oh,
is a good
yeah, I
film.
agree.
Fuck you if you don't like this film. Not
No,
really,
no,
but
no.
argue with me, like debate me in a nice, good faith manner. The good film makes you feel things. Makes
yeah,
you think.
I
and
think
makes
Leaving
you,
Las Vegas is great.
Yeah.
However,
Someone told me it's a bad movie. I know. I'm sorry. I can't get over the fact that people.
no,
think
it's
a bad movie.
okay. It's okay.
Sorry. Continue. Good film.
At the time when I watched this film,
Mm-hmm.
it was very late, and we were all like hanging out in a lounge, and I saw it, and I was like, I want that. I was like, I want to do that. I was like, that looks appealing to me. Like what he just did. Like, let me do that.
There was a sense of that with me too. Not at the end. I think I had like, I think I was like the prostitute, and you were like Nicholas. I think we both went in there and had like a similar like
That's so
mindset,
funny.
and then like I came out of it like, let me be more like the prostitute, and like I guess you were like Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I was like, well, because I mean, at that point in my life, like, there was very few points throughout my life since, like, the 3rd grade where I wasn't, like, actively suicidal. Like, it was just something that, like, defined my whole life. And seeing that movie, I was like, well, this guy had fun, and then he killed himself. And, like, he got to have a lot of, like crazy sex and do crazy things, and, like, you know, like, yeah, sure. Like, it was also beautiful. It was beautiful, like, the way he died and, like, the way he even, like, lived at the end. It was, like, there was a level of beauty to it, and I was always interested in beauty and, like
There's a
having
reason
beautiful
this
life.
woman saw something in him, like stayed with him, and like stopped being a prostitute. Like that's what I'm saying. There, yeah, like that,
Because
like,
he was
recognition
beautiful,
and that, and
yeah,
that.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like yeah.
Even though he was horribly self-destructive and, like, toxic. But so I saw that. I was like, well, he was beautiful, and then he died, and he had fun dying. And so, like, that was appealing to me. And I went on this, like, walk, and I was just walking aimlessly, and I got to a place where I had no idea where I was. And I was just like, I need to make a decision. Like, I need to like, make a decision one way or the other. Like, this is, I'm either about to, like, slip into this or not. Like, and I had that moment, and I think that was one of the first, like, times in my life where I was really confronted with something and, like, chose to improve and chose to say, like, no, I'm not going to do that, and I want to get better. Like, and it was really difficult, and I didn't know where to start.
Yeah. What made you like? Do you know? Or did you just kind of spontaneous?
It was kind of just like I got to a place and I was sitting down and I was thinking about all this, and I was like I think like I was like I just recognized how much I wanted that, and I was like, okay, like at first I just wanted it, but then I was like, wait, let me take a step back and realize the fact that I want that is like that's something that like needs to alarm me right now. Like I need to feel alarmed
So
by
that
that.
thought was able to like.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Like seeing how
That's
much.
kind of how I felt like watching the movie. I was like,
Yeah.
that's me. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Really drinking, but
Yeah.
like
No, but
self-destructing
like
and-
exactly. Yeah, I wasn't, like I said, I didn't really use alcohol much, and I still don't. It's just never been something I engage with too much, and or much at all. And yeah, so there was that moment of like, okay, like let me move out of that. And so I did, sort of, but I still didn't really get much better. I don't know, the rest of that year I don't really remember much. Like I was so unhappy. Like, to be honest, like I was unhappy, and but then I remember I went home and I was working at Chipotle, and I found this purpose through working at Chipotle. I found a sense of like purpose that I didn't have with Taco Bell. I think because Chipotle had slightly healthier food and I was making a lot better money, so I had more of a sense of freedom. And I was like, wow, I could live this life. Like I could do this. Like I could just drop out of school, work at
I had
Chipotle.
so many similar, especially while I was depressed. I was actively working at Quick Check too, and I had a similar thing. I was like, wow, I get community. I get to give people food that, like, I mean, definitely isn't like cream of the crop in terms
Yeah.
of health, but like it's probably not killing them, and
Yeah.
it's like seems to be improving them. And wow, like, you know, community, food. Like I discovered I liked working with food
Yeah,
for a
me
lot of those
too.
reasons, and I discovered like food as like an
Shout
essential
food.
source of like community and like source of life.
Yes.
Quick Check really opened my eyes to that, which is funny because
Yeah, same for me with
a lot of
Chipotle.
people like
Not
take
Taco Bell
classes to
though.
realize this stuff, but I was just in fucking Quick Check and like what people
Yeah.
considered a shit job. I was also like really disoriented because like that was like out of all this time and change in my life through like food service, like people were telling me like this is like bad. Society was telling
Society.
me that like working at Quick Check was bad, that it was wrong,
Yeah.
that I'm in college and I'm into mathematics and philosophy, and I was going to see like guidance counselors and like the professors. I was talking to so many like sources, just looking for like some sense of like meaning that I was slowly grasping back after coming to grips with the Cartesian demon and like kind of getting over it. Not that not that you ever truly get over it, because I think that's what launches you into the kind of philosophy that even we do now. But in the sense of I was like moving on from it and growing from it, but I wasn't really growing too much from in terms of like the concrete social life at this point in my life that also is crossing over with where Alice is in her story.
Yes.
So I think I interject with where I was as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. And yeah, so I was just going to all these professors and guidance counselors and teachers and my parents and everyone's like, college is the way to go. Like, you're doing the right thing and you'll figure it out. But no one told me how to do that. And all I was getting was kind of more and more lost. I'd ran into this Descartes guy, and that kind of changed my view on things. But like, aside from that, I was like, okay, great. My view on reality slightly switched, but I'm still in this shitty situation where I like don't know what I want to do for, you know, work, for a career. And one of my criticisms of Drew, I love Drew. Overall, it was a positive experience. I'm not at Drew anymore currently. I'm at the New School for Social Research doing my master's degree in philosophy with a concentration in psychoanalytic studies. But and I miss Drew, and it's positive. But criticism I have of it is that it's very career oriented. They kind of shove networking down your throat, especially they don't do it as much anymore. I'm talking to people now who are like students like Alice and even like, you know, younger ones who are in the philosophy club that are now taking it over for me and that I'm gone. And a lot of this stuff seems to have gone away. But when I was there, it was so freaking like
Honestly, from my experience, I would say I wouldn't agree with that. Like, there's a lot of networking stuff that happens still, and there's even more. It's maybe more helpful, maybe a bit less direct,
I think
but
the thing I'm talking about is like they removed True 110.
oh
I don't
yeah,
know what it means there, but for just so you understand, like
I see.
Okay, well maybe it's helpful for them too. So there was like a career class where they essentially showed you how to sign up for LinkedIn, and we had like career, like, oh, what are you interested in? And they gave you
it was mandatory.
They gave you like five. Yeah, it was mandatory to take. And
Everyone hated
They
it.
gave you 5 sectors of careers to choose from, and they're like going to one. It was just funny. None of it was academia, by the way, which is ironic because we're at a fucking university. So like,
so
like,
ridiculous.
Not telling anyone to go into academia, which is like can be a fair thing, but the fact that they weren't acknowledging that it exists is kind of fucked, especially as someone who's like going into that and living in that world now.
It was such a horrible environment.
Yeah, it's like all these like corporate careers. There wasn't really blue collar things as well. Like they were all just like various forms of like office jobs or like government jobs.
Because the
And
people
like,
who were there were office workers or government workers, and so that's their entire framework
and
of
they were, like, just
reality.
shoving that on us, and they're like, pick. And then I was like, fuck this, dude. You know, like this isn't helpful. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
So I bring it back to where I like started this interjection. We kind of like, I think we both did. We've talked about this, so I think, and we're talking about it now. I think we both kind of found this salvation from this situation, so to speak, through food service. We're like, oh, here's meaningful work that I
Yeah.
can do concretely. It's not this abstract
Yes.
bullshit where I have to like make money for. I mean, we were making money for rich people, but at least there was this like
There's a
byproduct.
tangibility of it.
Yeah,
I'm
there's a
handing
meaningful
food
byproduct,
to
you
this
know?
person, and I'm doing work.
And I'm building community.
Yeah.
There were regulars that I would like meet and like
Mhm.
you know, and there's such cool people. Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
People who work in food service are always amazing. Like, and there's this. Well, okay, that's very true. But like, often you find a really strong sense of community because of how grueling the work is. Especially, I found like, especially at the Chipotle I was working at, like, we were crazy understaffed as many food service places are, and so like we were doing way too much work with like a really small team. So it creates this sense of really like closeness, and so. Is it okay if I go back to my, like...
please.
Okay, cool. No, it's okay. A big thing for me working there was I had my first moment of, like, standing up to an authority figure because I was working there and there was this manager, and he was... I love him, actually. He's my friend, but he was very, like, sort of, like, exploitative in a lot of ways, and he would just, like... He'd always kind of, like, get people to stay after by, like, asking, like, passive-aggressive kind of, like... And so there was this one night where, like, the two people that were working with us were visiting from another store, and it was just the four of us, and the store was crazy busy, and like the other people who were supposed to show up for work weren't, and so it was just the four of us, and all of us were like there like almost an hour overtime, and I told the other people, I was just like, go home. And they were like, okay. And they left. And the other manager came in and he was like, where'd they go? And I was like, they went home. And he was like, who told them to go home? And I was like, me. And he was like, what? He was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, listen, like, this is not our responsibility. The store is crazy overstaffed. The other people haven't shown up. Like, this is our general manager's responsibility. This is her issue. This is her problem. And I just left. And like, I guess he called the GM, and she was like, yeah, like, she like agreed with me because I was right. Like, even from a corporate standpoint, I was like being accurate and like, yeah. And
so the reason I quit Quick Check was because like I had not many, but like too many of those. It's not for it to be like unacceptable, and like yeah, management like would just like try to gaslight me and be like, that's like your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like either like you, not always management, but just like coworkers. Like Quick Check started really good and like went down really quickly because freaking Murphy USA. I don't like you because you made Quick Check bad.
Is that a company?
Yeah, they
I
bought
see.
out of Quick Check, which was a family-owned company, and ever since then the culture totally changed. And not that they're responsible for like literally everything, but I think like indirectly they're responsible for a lot of it, at least if not directly.
Mm-hmm.
And it went from like an understanding like cooperative kind of place to where and I say indirectly because like a lot of good people really left because of the pay. Like the pay like went down. They made the pay go to like the higher level like workers that have been there for years, and they took part-time away, but it's a food service job.
Yeah,
like,
how can you not have part-time?
You're only going to have like a handful, if you're lucky, of people that have been there for like their career. Like you're going to get part-time workers. It's a high turnover, part-time kind of environment. Mm-hmm. So they started not fair. So then the good part-time people left, and then we were left with like the real shitty, like in terms of attitude, like real shitty, like, and then like corporate people came in and they were horrible. They would like attack me for being a student. Like yeah, and like at one point they had like shortly after I quit a few months later they had like let go all of the college workers because they weren't college,
wow,
like that. There are more details that I'm like leaving out because I don't remember them, but that's like essentially what ended up happening. So Quick Check just fell off, and like a similar thing happened where like, you know, I would just like be the one guy left on the shift or something, or like or one of the last two people on the shift, and then like I would do like a few wrong things because I was trying to cut corners just so I'd get the freaking job done and get the food to the people.
Yeah.
They'd always turn around on me and make it like it was me a problem.
Yeah.
And one day I just had enough of it was actually because they were attacking an assistant manager that I really liked, and they were just totally attacking him because he was left in that position, and I was like, that's not cool. I don't want to work in an environment where like we do this to each other, especially to someone who gives their all to this company, because he the assistant manager I was working at the time really did. and they're like, okay, then fuck off. And I'm like, okay. And
Yeah.
I just texted them. I'm like, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Never spoke to them again.
Yeah,
But anyway,
that's so
yeah.
real.
It's like super
Yeah.
philosophical and very tangential, but
No,
I can
no.
relate
I
to
mean,
your.
this video is definitely more us than philosophy at this point, I think. But yeah, so I had that experience at Chipotle, but also that summer I just had this experience of like I was working and I was making money and I got a sense of freedom, and I had a really deep sense of like I don't want to end up like my parents. Like I had this really visceral realization. Like I remember I was like I was in the bathroom like in my house, and I was sitting there and I was like, "Oh my God, like I can't be here. I can't be here anymore. Like I can't keep doing this. I can't live in this house and I can't live in this place. I can't live with these people. Can't be like these people." And I just had this realization of like something's wrong with the way that everyone around me is living, and I don't want to be doing it. And so I had a pull to like move away from college and just go that route and like maybe like live in a van or something, which I mean I would love to live in a van, but like not in the same context or way. And I felt that, but I got back to Drew and I decided to stay. And my sophomore year started out kind of deceptively positive, but I began to slip into at that point more of a deeper depression than I had ever gone through, and it was really spiritual. It was kind of like a spiritual awakening in a lot of ways, and that made it more like brutal and more uncomfortable. And um, I was in some classes that were talking about gender, and I was also just meeting other trans people more and interacting with trans people more, and I like had a moment of like I couldn't keep repressing what was going on in my head, and like there had been a lot of little things leading up to me like actively like actually coming out. There were a lot of moments of like like a little step or a little thing here and there, and it just all kind of came together in this like really horrible dark storm that was like one of the most difficult periods of time that I've gone through in my life. However, I will say I look back on it now very fondly. Like there was a lot of cool moments there, like because like I said, it was a spiritual awakening in a lot of ways, and like even though that's dark and difficult, it was also like I was interacting with the universe, and like there was a level of like consciousness and like expansion, and like I'm moving to new levels of reality, and like it was really cool in a lot of ways. And it was dark and twisted but like interesting, and it was like I was climbing out of hell, it felt like, and that was cool. And then I like came out, and the second half of my sophomore year, like it was still difficult in a lot of ways, but it was just like it was such a relief, and it was so much like better than I had ever felt, really, and I was so much happier than I had ever felt. And by the time that my sophomore year ended, I was really happy. And at the end of my sophomore year, I had had an experience with psilocybin, and it was kind of just a more like a traditional, like you take this thing with your friends and you have a good time, whatever. But it was pretty powerful, and it was pretty like I thought it was going to change my life, and I thought it was going to like do the work for me, and it kind of showed me that I could have a really good life and a really positive life. And I was like, oh, there's my way out. Like this has changed everything. And so I was expecting to go home and just have everything fall into place, but it did not. My home life that summer became incredibly volatile. I was like my housing situation was kind of unstable. I wasn't sure if I was going to have a consistent housing situation, and it was just like the most difficult time in my life practically. Like before I was depressed, but now I was being faced with like this real world like survival like difficulty. And I started doing a lot of research into psychedelics. I wasn't taking any psychedelics. I had the one experience in sophomore year, but I was doing a lot of research, and I was reading a lot, and I was learning a lot, and I was learning a lot about American culture. And I had learned a lot about American culture through history of labor and history of advertising classes that I had taken at Drew, which really radically changed my worldview and especially my view on America. But I did a lot of research that was more like non-academic and just like listening to a lot of lectures, especially by this one figure, Terence McKenna, who.
Oh, we have a video on
Yes, yes, it's true.
produced
By me.
entirely by you.
Yes. Um,
Shout out.
yes, he is certainly very problematic in many ways, as I have come to learn. But
Sort of the philosophers
of
we make
course,
videos on, but
yeah.
doesn't mean you should throw away their entire
Mhm.
philosophy or wisdom or whatever they have to offer.
Yeah, so true.
Considering
And
people too, I think
oh, certainly.
everybody has something to offer.
Yeah, I would agree.
Simplicity.
But yeah, with Terrence in particular, like I just became really like this was the way I saw the world, and I saw through his framework, and I really adopted it a lot. I also was listening to a lot of JPEG Mafia, the musician, which was just overall unhealthy and toxic, and I had this really like entering junior year of college. I had developed this like I had come out the previous year.
Which for context is last year from when you're watching.
Yes.
From when this video.
Yeah, it's a year ago.
We're really getting to the end. I think,
Yes.
chronologically. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Incredibly happy to have you here. So yeah, overall like I had come out the previous year and I was going by Alice, but then when I went home I started going by Alex because I didn't want to face like discrimination in hiring. I didn't want to deal, and so I was working and I was going by Alex, and I just like had kind of a setback in terms of like coming out of my identity. Like I had a setback and a switch back, and I started like leaning into kind of toxic masculinity habits to like kind of cover up. And by the time I got to college again, like that's where I was at. I was just like in this like horrible grind set, but also having these really grind set being caused mostly by JPEG Mafia, to be honest. And like that's that way of thinking. Not only I won't like blame him or anything. Like it was caused by myself, but it was like that's the way I was thinking. And but I had also had like it wasn't like any like my progress was completely gone because I had a more brutal spiritual awakening because it was more, like I said, like practical and like in my face, and like my stability was questioned and my like survival mode was activated, and I had a lot of really deep, really powerful meditative experiences, a lot of like straight up like visions. Like I remember one night I was walking around my hometown and I was at like the local church. I was looking at these like really beautiful portraits they have, and I was not on any substances, but like the portraits just started like moving. Like I like stood and I had a kind of like out of body experiences with like multiple of the portraits, and then I went and I sat on this bench next to a shrine that I visited sometimes like throughout my life, and I had this incredibly beautiful vision of like kind of like merging with plant consciousness, and like there were these like fun bright colors, and it was just wonderful. It was really nice. And so there were a lot of moments like that throughout the summer, but overall I think a lot of that was like little like here and there stuff, and more like sparse and more like subconscious change. But on a conscious level, I was just really like slipping into like a dark kind of way of living and like a really toxic way of living, even though I was also improving habits. Like I quit caffeine, I was running and doing things like that, but I just like my mindset was like work, survive, like no time for gender, like no time for self-expression, no time for like self-care, like work, and just kind of using that as an excuse to not explore myself and learn about myself. And so junior year of college happens, and that's kind of where I was. I was in that really, really shitty mind space, and I had some more psychedelic experiences. I had two specifically trips that were both like, one was rough, but the second one was honestly just one of the most difficult experiences of my life. It was really brutal, and it kind of like broke me down, and I was like in this survival mode consciousness, and it like took that survival mode consciousness person and was like, you're useless, like you don't have a function anymore, you don't need to be here anymore because your life is getting better, actually. But it was like I didn't really care that my life was getting better because it meant that I was dying, because like that survival mode that I had built up over years of like repression and all this stuff, which had like come to the surface fully now, like, it didn't want to die, and it didn't want to heal, and it didn't want to get better. Um, and I was also like really well read in all this like psychedelic literature, and so my experience was kind of like I went into it with the intention of like a rigorous medicinal like shamanic like learning experience, and it was that in the sense that like I learned that like the collective consciousness and the earth is in horrible pain, and the way I learned that was that that horrible pain of like climate change and the earth and like the disease of culture that exists was in my body for 8 hours, and what felt like kind of an eternal like timeless state. And it was just there, and I was seeing all these people like abusing psychedelics and misusing psychedelics, and seeing this like imagery of like people like throwing up outside of 7-Elevens, and like I can talk more about this in another video, but just that year and that first semester of that year was really like psychedelically informed and dark and spiritual and incredibly difficult, and more difficult than anything I had faced at the time. But I managed to stay like grateful and changing my mindset throughout. And I had this experience of like I was doing all these things to change my mindset, but it wasn't actually like working. Like I had these new mechanisms, but they weren't making me happier. But then um, over winter break, I kind of realized like, oh, like I'm well, and through that psychedelic experience, actually, that really helped as well. But helped in a way that was really painful. But over winter break, I kind of realized like I need to stop grinding. I need to stop working. I need to stop just like pouring myself into work and throwing my life away, basically. Like I just didn't know what I was doing. I was just like let me like make and make and make and create and create and create, and like not take care of myself. And so I realized that, and I realized that I was neglecting myself in the sense that like I was basically just like not acknowledging the fact that like I was a woman, and that was like a critical part of how I experience the world and how I want to be perceived. And I was not acknowledging my dysphoria, and I was kind of like pushing it away, and just acting like it wasn't there. And so I kind of realized that over winter break, and when I came back to school after winter break, I just had a really big mindset change, and I started to get into more holistic health, and I started to do a lot of really deep self-care and more meditation, and um, just became overall like a much more positive and happy person. And I managed like it was like all the work I had been doing this whole time, because this whole time I was doing a lot of work. It was just like I wasn't like work on myself, but I wasn't allowing it to come into my consciousness because I was repressing the benefits. Like I was doing all this spiritual work, but I was like I don't deserve to reap the rewards of it. Like I need to just keep working. And then like that changed, and I was able to come into myself more and remember who I was more and live in that way. And so my second semester of last year, junior year for me, was really kind of amazing, and it was just light and wholesome and free. And like there was this sense of like a darkness lifting, and like a realization of like, oh, like I don't have to live in this and like I'm doing this to myself at this point. Like previously in my life it was imposed by the external reality in a lot of the times, but at this point like I had done the work, I had changed myself enough, but I just wasn't accepting that. I wasn't accepting like the gifts that like the universe and reality was trying to give me. And I also was pushing off my grief. And I think when I started to feel my grief, when I started to accept my grief and sit with it, then I was able to become happier and become more overall like healthy and happy to be alive and grateful and present. And I like then over the summer I stayed on campus here, and I worked in the forest, which you can learn a bit about in the last video that we posted, which is called Alice Holloway's Personal Metaphysics and Life Experience, I think.
Alice Holloway's Personal Life and Metaphysics.
Yeah, and so yeah, that was incredible. Working at the forest really changed my life, and made me realize that, like, yes, psychedelic healing is something that I think kind of is a necessary part of the change that is going to happen in the country and in the world. However, there's also the really practical, just boots on the ground, like gardening and sustainability and community that we need to form. And that's where I really developed this passion for what I talked about in a last video as like the agricultural revolution. And that's become like a big part of my life, and also just got more into art, more into music. Had time to develop myself and work on myself.
Started Absolute Spirit.
Yes, we started Absolute Spirit.
May 26th.
Oh wow, that's super cool. You remember? I do not remember.
I've just been looking at like analytics.
Oh, I
on
see.
YouTube, so like I've just been like seeing like lifetime May 26th. I could be messing that up too. I think it's something May and ends. It's either May 16th or 26th. I think. That's when we started Absolute Spirit, and that's a result, I guess, of your part.
And that was really helpful for me as well.
It's cool seeing how all these have like led to this and what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to like this is
no,
like
no, you're
like
so good.
End content, so I don't want to end your story early if you have more details. But I figured I would.
Yeah, I have like. Hello again, and thank you so much for watching. That's gonna conclude this video. The next one will come out a week from today, and it will be the third and final installment in this series. Thank you so much if you stuck with it. Really appreciate your interest in our personal lives, and thank you for being a part of this community. We love you. Thank you. Good day, good night.